The little girl pressed the piano key with one small finger and said softly, "Sir, I learned this song from my mommy." The note floated through the cafe like a whisper from the past, and in that instant, the lonely CEO forgot how to breathe. Snow drifted gently through the night sky, each flake glowing as it passed beneath the street lamps, turning Christmas Eve into something quieter, almost sacred. On the corner of an old cobblestone street stood a small cafe that looked as if it had grown there naturally over time. Its windows glowed amber against the cold, promising warmth to anyone willing to step inside. Within those walls, laughter murmured softly, mugs clinked, and the scent of cinnamon, cocoa, and roasted coffee beans wrapped around every soul like a blanket. A modest Christmas tree stood near the fireplace, decorated not with expensive ornaments, but with hand-tied bows and wooden stars, each one slightly imperfect and deeply loved. It was the kind of place where memories lingered in the floorboards and stories seemed to breathe. The door chimed gently as it opened, and Daniel Wyatt stepped inside. He was tall, composed, wrapped in a tailored black coat and a gray scarf that still smelled faintly of city rain. He looked out of place, and yet somehow exactly where he was meant to be. At 32, Daniel was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, a man whose days were filled with boardrooms, projections, and headlines. He had just left a lavish company gala, glittering with chandeliers and hollow conversations, and he had hated every second of it. This cafe, quiet and imperfect, felt like refuge, like a pause. He ordered coffee and took a seat near the back, folding his hands together as he stared through the fogged-up window into the snowy dark. His reflection stared back at him, tired, distant, a man who had everything except the one thing he couldn't calculate. Then he heard it. The first notes were tentative, played on a piano slightly out of tune. Small fingers pressed the keys carefully, hesitating, correcting themselves, pressing on anyway. The melody wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Daniel turned slowly toward the sound. Near the Christmas tree sat a little girl, no more than 5 years old. Curly brown hair was tied back with a red ribbon, and her red dress fluttered slightly as her feet dangled above the floor. She leaned forward in concentration, brow furrowed, playing not with precision, but with heart. Daniel froze. The song was Winter Glow, a melody that had never been released, never published, never shared with the world. A song that had existed only once before, written by a girl who believed in love and music with her whole soul. A song written for him. Grace Carter. She had composed it when they were 17, when love felt endless and the future felt kind. She was supposed to play it for the first time on stage, her debut concert, but that day never came. Grace disappeared before the performance. Family illness, whispered explanations, a life derailed. No goodbye, no closure, just silence. Daniel had searched for her then, called and waited and hoped, until time buried the ache beneath success and responsibility. And now, impossibly, the song was alive again, carried through the imperfect bravery of a child. When the final note faded, Daniel realized he was standing. The coffee sat forgotten behind him as his heart pounded hard enough to drown out the room. He walked toward the piano slowly, as if afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too quickly. The girl smiled shyly at the light applause around her and took a sip of cocoa. Daniel crouched beside her, careful not to startle her. "That was beautiful," he said gently. "May I ask where you learned that song?" She tilted her head, eyes bright. "From my mommy," she answered. The word struck him like a chord played too loud. She said she wrote it when she was in love. He stared at the girl, at her easy smile and the quiet confidence in her posture. She looked like no one he knew, and yet something about her tugged painfully at his chest. "It's my favorite," she added cheerfully. "Mommy says it makes the snow feel warmer." Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, time stopped. Grace was the only person who could have written that song, and this child, this small girl who spoke of love as if it were music itself, could only be one thing. Daniel straightened slowly, the realization settling deep in his bones. Grace Carter had never forgotten him, and now neither would he. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Ellie," she said proudly. "I'm 5.5. I play piano with Mommy, and I really, really like marshmallows." He smiled before he could stop himself. "And your mommy?" he asked carefully. "She taught me Winterglow," Ellie said. "She wrote it for someone a long time ago." Before Daniel could speak, a familiar voice called from behind the counter. "Ellie, sweetheart, it's time to put your coat on. We're closing soon." Daniel turned, and the world tilted. Grace stepped into view, wiping her hands on a towel dusted with cocoa powder and flour. Her long blonde hair was tied back loosely, strands framing her face. She wore a faded green sweater and jeans marked by a long shift. She was different from the girl he remembered, and yet unmistakably the same. Their eyes met, and 10 years collapsed into a single breath. Campus benches, shared headphones, promises whispered under falling leaves. The day she vanished without a word. "I didn't expect to see you again," Grace said at last, her voice steady, "especially here." Daniel tried to respond, but every word he had ever prepared scattered into silence. Grace knelt to Ellie, brushing a crumb from her cheek and sending her off for her coat. Then she straightened, arms loosely crossed. "You look different," she said. "So do you," Daniel replied. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "You weren't supposed to," Grace said calmly. "You left," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, "and I'm sorry." There was more she didn't say, and more he didn't ask. Instead, he watched the way she looked at Ellie, fierce and gentle at once. "She's amazing," he said. "She is," Grace agreed. He took a breath. "I'd like to catch up sometime." After a moment, she nodded. "Maybe." Ellie ran back, mittens crooked, whispering conspiratorially to Daniel. "I think Mommy smiled. She doesn't do that much." That night, something opened. Daniel returned the next Saturday and the one after that. He came quietly, without suits or headlines, sitting in the corner near the piano. Ellie played with fearless determination, missing notes and finding them again. He listened every time. He always listened. Grace noticed the notes he left behind, the small gifts, the way Ellie watched the door for him now. And when Ellie fell ill one winter night, burning with fever, Grace found herself standing in a hospital hallway she couldn't afford, watching Daniel carry her daughter as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He paid without conditions, stayed without praise, and left his jacket over Grace's shoulders when she fell asleep from exhaustion. He didn't rescue them. He simply stayed. The truth about the past came out slowly. The dying mother, the fear, the silence born from love and self-sacrifice, and the resentment, sharp and raw, was faced instead of buried. They argued, they cried, they broke open old wounds and let them breathe. When Grace learned her music had once been rejected by Daniel's company without him ever hearing it, the pain cut deep. But instead of running, he stood there and said, "Then let me stay. This time I won't leave." Ellie's small hand struck a single piano key, the note ringing out like a promise. The benefit concert came quietly, named not after donors or corporations, but after a little girl with brave hands. Ellie played Winterglow for a room full of people who finally understood what love sounded like. Grace watched from the wings, heart full. Daniel stood in the back, no longer frozen. 1 year later, the cafe glowed brighter than ever. Children gathered around the piano. Ellie, now 6, guided smaller fingers patiently. Grace moved easily behind the counter, laughter no longer guarded. And when Daniel walked in with messy cookies and a warm smile, Ellie ran to him shouting, "Daddy's here!" There were no speeches, no announcements, just time, presence, and choice. Later, under falling snow, they walked together, hand in hand, the melody of Winterglow humming softly between them. Love hadn't returned the way it once was. It had grown into something quieter, steadier, truer. And as the snowflakes danced in the streetlight glow, the music finally found its way home. Thank you for spending time with this story of love, memory, and second chances. If this journey moved you, please subscribe and support the Soul Stirring Stories channel. Your support allows us to keep sharing stories that remind us what truly matters. Until the next one, stay kind, stay present, and remember, Sometimes a single melody can bring an entire life back together.